Click. And we're live. It is Thursday, October 14th, 2021, 5:01 p.m. And I want to start by saying those of us with class have a Costa Rica part of the year and a Washington, D.C. part of the year. Those of us without class, just don't have that. But our guest today is just starting his D.C. part of the year. We've been calling him Costa Rica Bureau of Lawfare for the last 6 months or so. But he's back in Washington. We're not allowed to have fun anymore, but he is, because he gets to spend, like half the year in Costa Rica. Paul Rosenzweig, you've been back on the show. You're back on the show. Welcome back. We're not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed to have Paul Rosenzweig, who's here to talk to us about cybersecurity monoculture. So,
well,
Paul,
I'm going to simulate fun for just a little bit in the hopes that everybody else can enjoy. What's not to have fun about, being back in Washington?
It's true. It's great. You're only blocks away from where the next Capitol insurrection will happen, and it's you can sell hot dogs for it. So Paul, what is cybersecurity monoculture?
Well, a monoculture is a concept that we borrowed from biology. Almost everybody who's listening to this probably has heard of the concept of herd immunity. The idea that eventually we may all get COVID and we'll all be sick, and then we'll get well, and then COVID will die out. A monoculture is kind of the exact opposite. It is a biological herd vulnerability that renders an entire community potentially vulnerable to a disease. Two really good examples from history. In the 1970s, all of the American corn almost all of it was a single variety of high yield corn. And we had a corn blight that came out. And it was a corn monoculture. All of that corn was vulnerable to the blight. We literally lost 15% of the corn in the United States in a matter of weeks, and they had to burn a whole bunch of the rest of it in order to prevent the spread. Another example that is a kind of monoculture of biology that probably people are familiar with is the causes are not so well agreed upon, but everybody understands that the largest cause of death amongst the Native American population in the United States in the run-up to the Revolution was not war with the white settlers, but rather smallpox, because the Native American culture was a monoculture of vulnerability to smallpox. Biological monoculture risks like that don't persist very long, because, of course, eventually the disease that they're awake to comes along and wipes out the biological niche, and the corn goes away, and then all of a sudden the rest of the corn that's left survived, and natural selection means that we have corn that is no longer vulnerable to corn blight now, and likewise, by and large, the smallpox threat to the Native American culture has dissipated over time. That's monoculture, biology. Cybersecurity monoculture is the same thing, translated into bits and bytes. It's the idea that everybody or almost everybody, uses the same suite of operating systems or a single email communications thing, possibility, or a single point of sale at a commercial enterprise, or a single bank management and transfer system. The reason in cyber that we have monocultures is really easy to describe. It's cost. It's cheaper. If everybody on Lawfare uses Crowdcast.io, because we can provision Crowdcast.io for in lieu of fund readily, and we can teach new people how to do this, we're never going to have two ways of broadcasting. One is we pick one, it's the easiest, we teach everybody how to use it, you expand it, it works great. But if there was a problem in the Crowdcast operating system and a malicious hacker wanted to stop in lieu of fund from appearing, heaven forbid, we'd have no alternatives. We run a monoculture communications platform on in lieu of fund. Now for us, it's really not that big a deal. You could, if we ran out of, if somebody whacked us, we'd be off the air for a week, and then we'd fix it, we'd be back on. Or we'd change to Zoom or something like that. But if you are a government, say, a national security government agency, monocultures can be bad. Monocultures are risky. That's a very long introduction.
So let me ask you a couple of questions about this. Isn't all first of all, in lieu of fund does not seem to me to be obviously a monoculture. If somebody hacked Crowdcast and took it down, we could do this on Zoom. We could do it on YouTube. What makes this? Yeah, what makes it, in your judgment, a monoculture?
Well, the idea of monoculture and the real root of it is essentially the difficulty of transitioning on a quick enough timescale to mitigate the harms. And so, truthfully, you're probably right. In lieu of that's probably a bad example because we could transition in a day or two. But for example, if all of the Department of Defense's infrastructure is run on a single cloud system, as they thought to do with the recently terminated JEDI contract, then that's not a transition you can make readily. What prompted me to write the article was a report from a consulting company that said that 85% or more of the collaboration tools used by the U.S. government are from a single provider. And, it doesn't say that the provider is bad or anything like that. I don't want to call them, but even our best providers, the Microsofts, Googles, and Amazons get whacked at some point. And if the government's unitary collaboration tool were taken down, then the cost of in lieu of transitioning to Zoom is near zero and can happen overnight. The cost of the federal government transitioning to a different collaboration platform is not near zero and cannot happen overnight.
I think the perfect example, I guess, of what you're saying is the SolarWinds hack, that so many people across the government and it's at Fortune 500 companies use the Orion network monitoring software, and so all you needed to do was, infect the update, and then you got everyone. So that's like a kind of a nice, I think, instantiation of what you're talking about, right?
Yes, that's a great one. The Microsoft Hafnium Exchange hack is another example. Actually, my favorite one that I really want to talk about is Facebook from 2 weeks ago. Now, for you and me, Facebook is not mission critical. We use it for social media, and when it went down, I transitioned to my Twitter account for most of what I was doing, and so did everybody else. So much so that Twitter, posted a little "Hello, everybody, welcome to Twitter," and but it is a mission critical. But I live, as Ben said at the top of the show, part of the year in Costa Rica, and oddly enough, in Costa Rica, Facebook is mission critical. No business there runs a company-specific web page. It's too expensive. Facebook has made it really cheap, so they provision a Facebook page with their location, their hours, their menu if they're a restaurant, or their sales list if they're a shopping company. Directions on how to get there, everything behind it. Then they back it up with pictures of their goods, et cetera, et cetera. Even more so, given the comparative weakness of the cell phone service infrastructure there, almost everybody does 80% of their communication on WhatsApp, which was also down. Now, they don't choose WhatsApp for the encryption. Yeah, it's a benefit. They don't care about privacy. It's easy. It works. It's easy. So when Facebook was down for 6 hours a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago now, I guess it was, literally the communications in Costa Rica didn't grind to a halt because there was the commercial cell phone service option, but it was severely impacted, and it's because Facebook has done a really good job of making itself an essential service for advertising and communications, as well as what you and I use it for, social media, love, and life, and so it is to a large degree a monoculture in Costa Rica that is far more essential. Now, at this point, it seems important to say one more thing about it, which is that for lots of enterprises, that's okay, right? If you're a restaurant in Atenas, Costa Rica, where I live, the prospect of being down for a bit, it pisses you off, but the ease of application, the low cost barriers to entry, the social network that you get from Facebook is really worth it. So it's a risk you take, and you don't have to worry too much about adverse consequences. And the same is probably true of lots of domestic applications here in the United States, even within government. If the Department of Agriculture helpline goes down because the collaboration tool goes offline, that's bad. And I don't want to minimize it, but it doesn't burn the house down. Mm-hmm. What concerns me, or what I think of most when I think about this problem, is the national security implications. The idea that some of our national security enterprise operations, whether they're communications, collaboration, cloud software, whatever it is, reside on depend on singular operating systems, singular tools, singular applications, singular whatever, and thus are singular points of failure. It is, and that monoculture risk is both real and potentially catastrophic.
So I have a quick question, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. One of the things that I kept thinking about when you were describing Facebook in a different setting outside of the United States is that here it's a market choice, and there it's acting as an institution. So that distinction sets up an interesting question on from my end, is that the market seems to have selected these singular points because of their efficiencies, because they are perhaps better user interfaces, and in a area, especially our national security arena, where you have multiple choices, theoretically the best choice has won. Do you think that it's a problem with how we select the systems that we'll be using, or do you think that the market has brought the cream to the top and we just need to have more innovation?
Well, that's a great question. First off, I think you're absolutely right that by and large, the trend towards monocultures in IT systems is the product of economic efficiencies, whether it's better quality produce or ease of provisioning. The new system is backward compatible with the old one, so the transition is much simpler. Ease of training. You only have to train people on one system. That's why for years Southwest Airlines only had 737s, because their pilots had to only train to one plane instead of learning 737s and 767s and Airbuses. So there's huge reasons that are perfectly legitimate, ranging from quality to provisioning. Some of those reasons, to be honest with you, before I kind of transition, are, I think, reasons less of actual economic efficiency than lock-in effects that prevent the innovators from coming in because the costs of transition are too high. And you get into this kind of idea of just keep doing what you want to do. But leaving that aside, I think that the answer for me is that in 80% of what enterprises do, those economic factors are right and probably are correct in driving the choice of a singular system. What I think we haven't actually accounted for enough is the risk, the low probability, high consequence risks of failure in singular systems in mission critical functionality. An example, I spoke briefly about it earlier. About 4 years ago, the Department of Defense announced that it was going to transition to a cloud-based system, and they were going to have a single source provider for the cloud. And the history came down to there was a big knife fight between Amazon and Microsoft, wound up going to court, and the whole thing got thrown out. And DoD has gone back to the beginning for a whole host of reasons, ranging from allegations of President Trump's interference into the bidding because he didn't like Jeff Bezos and Amazon, to other problems with the. They've reopened the bidding, and what they appear to be saying, which I think is a good thing if they follow through on it, is they're going to buy two clouds, independent clouds, and so we'll have a redundancy. And if we have an Oracle cloud and a Google cloud, or a Microsoft cloud and an Amazon cloud, or an IBM cloud and an Amazon cloud, if presuming that they don't share the same vulnerability, which is likely since they'll be developed separately, what it means is that adversarial action will not be able to target a single point of failure. And that, I think, is a good thing. So for me, the economics question is really a recapitulation of a lot of what we see in economics. I wrote a paper about this for Ben 10 years ago, about how in cybersecurity, the externalities of failure are not necessarily all borne by the enterprise operators, but they fall on us, you and me outside. See Colonial Pipeline as a good recent example.
Can I? So I wanna make the counter argument that actually we live in the United States in a vast hybrid digital culture. So I'm putting this out there both as devil's advocate and because I believe it's true. But so let's from a 35,000 feet level, it looks like there's a monoculture because there's really only two options. Like, let's take operating systems. That's the most important thing. There's Microsoft and there's Apple. Okay, and then on mobile, there's iOS and Android. But like when you kind of go down, you realize, wait a second, there's lots of different kinds of Microsoft operating systems. You know, there's for desktops and laptops, so there's some people running 7, some running Microsoft Windows 10, some 11. Then you have your servers. Like, there's a zillion different versions of the Microsoft Server software being run. I read somewhere that like the reason why ransomware is still such a problem is because many organizations around the United States are running Server Message Block 1, which was phased out in 2008, and it's still vulnerable to the Eternal Blue exploit. And then you have then you have the Internet of Things and the different versions of Linux, right? There's like thousands of different versions of Linux, and then you have supercomputers, and they run different things. So it sounds to me like, and take power systems, right? So like the grid. Okay, they're running 1,000 different operating systems, and they have 1,000 different network configurations. Go try to hack that. That's going to be impossible because you're not going to be able to figure out. And the reason why all this is true is because we live in a federal system, which has the federal government handles certain things, but not the states, and localities handle different things, and then we have a market, and so. So anyway, that was the counter argument to like actually it's not as bad as you think.
I guess I would say sort of, but not completely. I mean, you sort of at for example the API or application level, the diversity of stuff is such that vulnerability in my Android application is not the same as a vulnerability in your iOS application of the exact same app. Yeah, we both use the same banking app or something like that. Absolutely true. On the other hand, first off, at the operating system level, you sort of gave the game away a little bit because there are really only 2, or if you add Linux, 3, major operating systems. So that's a big one. And then the second thing is that really to kind of capture Genevieve's point and turn it back around on you, the monoculture drive is ease of application within an enterprise. The SolarWinds or the Microsoft Exchange, we have these big, bulky pieces that everybody uses because it makes interoperability relatively easy. You are absolutely correct, I think, that there are some aspects of the domain that are very diverse. The same report that I was talking about, where 85% of the government uses a single operating system, a single collaborating system, showed that the government uses at least 3, if not 4, cloud storage, data storage systems. They use, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Box. And so there we have a much more diverse environment for the storage of data that actually portends well, from my perspective, for the overall security of that. To take another one, the same study said that 60%, so not the 85% for collaboration tools, but 60% use only one type of email and calendaring communication system. So that's kind of on the edge, right? 60% is not 85, but it's not for diverse people, each with 10 to 30% of the market. So, I think I would say your point is exceedingly well taken, that the degree of monoculture or single point of failure dependence, if you want to call it that, is highly contextual and dependent upon where exactly you are in the domain and who you are. But, sometimes I worry that some of our truly critical structures are pretty darn dependent on single things.
So I want to ask you whether interoperability is the enemy of monoculture or the midwife of monoculture. So I look at not that many years ago, and we would have said basically every document in the world that was being created on a single word processor, Microsoft Word. Now, some people still use Microsoft Word, but a lot of people use, that Mac thing, Pages, and a bunch of people like me use Google Docs, and, people can use whatever they want, and they're all interoperable, and it's all pretty seamless. And I can make the argument that, well, that's non-monoculture, right? You have Microsoft Word is no longer the sort of dominant platform. And so if, the Russians take down Microsoft Word, we'll all just use something else for a few days. It's not a big deal, and it can read our files. On the other hand, you can make the argument that actually the interoperability allows the attack on Microsoft Word to affect all the other platforms in ways that it might otherwise do. And that may not be the case, that might not matter so much with Word documents, but it sure matters when operating systems or browsers are interoperable. And so my question is just like, how do we assess, or how should we assess whether interoperability is the solution or the enemy?
Well, that is also a good question. Let me first say that in terms of Word and document production, whoever invented Latex should rot in hell for forever, because it is the singularly most impossible thing to use. And I see in the comments that some people are actually using Latex. I'm sorry, but I just don't buy it. That having been said,
Latex?
I use it.
Yeah.
Latex, just go look it up. It's a word processing compiler program that allows you to seamlessly add in citations. It's used often in the scientific community, because you can also drop in formula.
I'm old enough to remember using ATEX, but not Latex. See, Scott got that.
Capital L, A, capital T, little e, capital X. Look it up.
I just got an actual laugh out loud from Scott.
That's right.
Yeah, and Latex allows you to practice safe text. Why is it bad, Susan? Because it's really, really hard to frickin' learn. It's not at all intuitive, at least not for me. So, in any event, you just gave me a chance to rant on this, because I had to learn Latex recently to do some work with some collaborators in a scientific field. And boy, that was hard. In any event, the answer to your question, Ben, is yes and no. But mostly, diversification in code is a good thing, because it tends to make platforms, operating systems, anything sufficiently different that the ease of attack on one is not the ease of attack on another. And so, by and large, I mean, like you said, I don't think anybody's actually going to attack the word processing systems of America. If they did, we'd probably actually benefit from it rather than be harmed. But to the extent that anybody wanted to, it is, as I understand it, highly unlikely that a flaw in Microsoft Word would transition to a flaw in Latex or Pages or Google Docs or any of the others, or vice versa. And so it is likely that having a multiplicity of those is good, though of course you also are exemplifying immediately the inefficiency of that multiplicity, as anybody who has tried to translate a Microsoft Word document into Google Docs and then tried to fix the footnotes readily knows. The transitions are not so seamless, and it doesn't work, one way or the other. And God help me if you use Pages from Apple, because it just doesn't. They don't play well with others. So we get the inefficiency that creates some of the security.
Are you going GDF or am I? Okay. So here's the counter argument. Okay. So at first I was like, no, actually, in fact, the U.S. has a cyber diverse culture. I want to do the opposite now. I want to say, actually, it should be more monoculture. Okay. So I'm sorry to be playing these games, but there's a way in which I was at a conference in the summer, and I was at DEF CON, and there was a talk given and showed that like the big problem with cloud computing has nothing to do with the software. It's just that people are really bad at configuring their accounts. They're like terrible at it. Okay, and so everything works right. It's like it's like a prison, but everyone accidentally leaves the doors open. Okay, and the trick, okay, is for people to learn how to use the thing that they're supposed to use. Like that's the trick. The trick is to make things more secure. People need to be really good at doing at least one thing. Like you only have one job.
The solution, Scott, is more PowerPoint presentations.
Well, I mean, more bits.
It's always the solution.
Right. So it's like there should be more monoculture because there will be less of these mistakes that come from like too many things to learn. What do you think about that?
A fair point, which is to say that much of the insecurity in the network is the result of human lack of capacity. Kevin Mitnick once famously said, "There's no patch for human stupidity," and that was cruel, but it was true. And so you're absolutely right in that way. On the other hand, once you get past that point, you are building essentially what we have come to call the Fort Knox problem, which is you're putting all the gold in Fort Knox. Everybody hews successfully to a single standard, and you're all great at it. But now you've given the adversary a single target, and unless you believe that you are not only all applying it perfectly, but that you've built it perfectly such that it has no flaws and is invulnerable to the malicious activity of others, you're in trouble. I mean, here's the example. Most people use Amazon Web Services or Google or Microsoft Office 365 precisely because they actually do it better than you and I. If I provision my system with Amazon Web Services, I have a pretty high degree of confidence that Amazon is doing as good a job as is reasonably possible to protect what we've given them. Ditto Microsoft, ditto Google. But the reality is that their very good is still not perfect. So we actually sort of already do what you do, to the extent that we offload everything to large tech providers like Google, Microsoft, Amazon. Oracle, they do excellent jobs. I mean, no doubt about it. They've got some of the best technical people around on their payroll, and they work very hard every day to do it. But that, I was reading the other day that there have been 15 zero days against Microsoft this year, and 4, I think it was, against Google. I don't quote me on the numbers because but it's a reality that they are imperfect. So even if we decided that one single company or one single government was the best and could do it all perfectly, we'd still be, putting the little, it's like the bummer of the birthmark cartoon with the guy with the little bear with the circular marks on his forehead. And one bear says, bummer of a birthmark, dude, because you're painting a target on your forehead. You haven't seen that, have you? You're looking at me, Scott, like you don't know what I'm talking about. It's one of those old Far Side cartoons.
One thing, though, in response to this point, at what moment do we need to have our institution are they supposed to contract with these people who have advanced technical ability and try and do something that's slightly individualized? Are they supposed to build something on their own? How, where should the protections or additional protections come from? Whose responsibility is it?
Well, those are also good questions. Let me ask the second of those first. Should we try and build it on our own? We've tried that in the past. The Department of Defense tried to build its own programming system. Programming language is called Ada, named after Ada Lovelace, who was the famous woman who was at the start of the computer era. It was a beautiful and elegant programming language that failed to change quickly enough, and it was just what you would expect from government. Really great, but late on delivery and behind the times. So it seems likely to me that that the government is most likely best advantaged by provisioning itself from commercial sources that are cutting edge. What I sort of think is the answer is that we need to go through some kind of risk analysis and ask which systems are so important that we should provision them twice with a known inefficiency, or 3 times. I mean, if you tell me that we should do it 3 times, I'll believe you. Sometimes, not 5, not 7, but 2 or 3. DoD's cloud system, I come back to it because it was front of my brain a year or so ago. Before that procurement went back to ground zero, would be a classic example, I think, of something that's worth doing twice. Government-wide collaboration systems, possibly. The nuclear code system, definitely. Probably like the Federal Reserve's bank clearing systems, probably. New York Stock Exchange, I don't know.
I'm sorry, do they not have them? I would have imagined that mission critical systems would have out of band contingency plans for communication. But I know you would know. But
they do, but they're out of band and thus inefficient. One of the most famous is that the Air Force has maintained some of its nuclear missiles under analog control, even though the analog systems are way out of date, but they're out of. But with that comes inefficiency, and so who knows? Likewise, they do. Here's a perfect example that will be familiar to everybody. We do an out-of-band system for maintaining quality control on our elections. It's called paper ballot backup. All right, and it's mission critical essential, as we proved just 2 years ago, and I'm glad we did it, or 1 year ago, 1 year and a half ago. I'm glad we did it, but it is notoriously inefficient, and so in a context where we have to get it right and we have to do so quickly, like say responding to Russian tanks going across the German plains, it would, I think, be better to have 2 redundant systems, neither of which was an inefficient analog system, but both of which were digital in nature and therefore usable.
All right. So speaking of monocultures, let's talk about John Eastman.
About who?
About Mr. Eastman.
John Eastman.
Dean Eastman. Yes.
Okay, you're changing topics on me there, but okay, I'm ready.
No. I'm gonna link it. So for those of you who don't know, which is to say all of you, Paul has drafted an article for Law Review for Lawfare on the case of Chapman Dean John Eastman, which we are getting ready to run. And I will let him describe the piece if he feels like it. But my question is John Eastman an example of a monoculture?
In what way?
I see what you did there, Ben.
Well, I'm kind of proud of it myself. So, all right. So you have a group of people who have a very powerful incentive to think one way and only one way. There are significant flaws in thinking that way, but there's a very powerful set of positive and negative incentives to do so, even at the risk of making yourself, look ridiculous, even at the risk of exposing yourself to bar discipline, even at the risk of, going from being a federal appeals court clerk and a lawyer or dean at a law school to being, the punchline of a joke on In Lieu of Fun. There are some downsides to behaving this way. And so I guess my question is this basically a social version of the same effect, whereas we have sort of a MAGA monoculture? It's extremely brittle because, it's not based on things like fact or science or reality. But the incentive to comport with it is strong enough that, everybody in that world uses it, even kind of knowing its flaws, and all of a sudden you've got a bar complaint against you in California.
Well, that's an interesting idea, Ben. I guess I would say no. I know you would want me to say yes, but I would say no. And the reason is this. The hallmark of a monoculture and a monoculture risk is its brittleness. I like that word. Its vulnerability to a single catastrophic failure in biology caused by corn blight, in the IT systems we've been talking about, caused by either an accident like with Facebook's misconfiguration of its border gateway protocol or a malicious actor, see China or Russia. I am not yet convinced that MAGA culture is that brittle. I would personally want it to be, and hope it will be proven so. But I would have thought that, for example, January 7th would be the day that the culture cracked and broke. So it is possible that we will see the infection of democracy eradicate the blight of MAGAhood, if you will. Boy, I'm straining this metaphor really a lot here just to answer your question. But so far, I haven't seen it actually proving to be that vulnerable to truth or facts at all. And as such, it is It's almost like MAGA herd immunity from facts, and the opposite of that. Now, that caveat being, of course, it will play out over the next 2 to 4 years, and we're all in the. I mean, I thought it was going to end in November 2020, and then in January 2021, and now here we are in October 2021. It hasn't ended yet. We'll see. I like the idea. And it is certainly the case that Eastman is the product of a cultural bubble, of which I have often been a part, though no longer. For those who don't know, on the thing, I'm a lapsed Republican, and part of the Reclaiming America group, Renew America movement, RAM. Go look at Renew America if you haven't seen it. It's quite a nice thing. Can I drop a plug here, Ben? Okay, yeah, no. The Renew America movement endorsed 21 middle-of-the-road candidates today, ranging from Liz Cheney to Alyssa Slotkin and Abigail Spanberger. And those are the types of politicians. They disagree a lot on policy, but they agree on democracy. They're all people that I'm going to support, and I think Renew America is supporting. There you go, plug over.
I just on the John Eastman thing, there was there's been a lot of criticism about FedSoc leaving, the Federalist Society leaving up his having a web page, a John Eastman web page. I was wondering I was wondering if you had thoughts about that.
I do actually. So just so that everybody's clear, I am still a member of the Federalist Society because I remain a reasonably conservative lawyer, and indeed I've been a member of the Federalist Society longer than almost everybody in the world, since I joined in 1983 and it was formed in 1982. So it's pretty hard to get there longer than
Chicago guy.
I'm a University of Chicago.
You actually came out of ground zero in FedSoc.
That is correct. I knew Lee Lieberman and Steve Calabresi when they were just kids and just cool.
For those of you who don't know FedSoc history, when Paul says he joined in '83, the FedSoc dates from Chicago in '82. So it's like, that's like almost like there, at the founding.
It was pretty much. So I'll say two things in response, Scott. The first is, in terms of keeping up a bio web page, they've got a web page basically for everybody who's ever spoken at one of their conferences. And, so they have a web page for Elizabeth Warren as well. And if they were to take him down as a historical matter, they'd probably as likely be accused of whitewashing history as anything else. Yeah, so keeping up. The question is, what is his future ongoing role in the Federalist Society, and how do they change what he does after these events? And I'm not an officer, so I have no direct knowledge, but I have read that Mr. Eastman has complained that he has been deplatformed by the Federalist Society and disinvited from a number of events to which he would normally be in attendance. So I forget whose blog I wrote it on, but they published a note from him. It was from Eastman himself, saying that the Federalist Society won't let him on anymore. And I will leave it to others to decide whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing, whether the Federalist Society should publicize that or not. But simply as a factual matter, I think keeping the page up is okay, because it's a matter of historical accuracy and reference to keep up a listing of everybody who's ever been a participant. And John has been a participant for 20 years. So you can't, like, I don't want to get into the, to the communist Beria, erasing Beria from the pictures on the mausoleum above Lenin's tomb, sort of thing. And as forward going, it seems like, they're doing it. They haven't done it publicly, which we can talk about whether they should do that or not. But it appears that he's been rendered persona non grata by his democratic apostasy.
All right. We are almost out of time, but if you have questions for Paul, this is a good time to get them in. We only have one on the queue, and it is from Paula, who asks me to read it for her. Paul, are there any examples of civil litigation succeeding against a company because of its failure to maintain, I assume, cybersecurity, or is this a fruitless effort?
It is not fruitless, but the instances are very, very rare. The main reason is that most states have laws that immunize companies under tort law for purely economic losses. If they direct those suits to contract law. And of course, when you took a service from Facebook or Google or whatever, you clicked through a contract that basically said you have no rights. There are a couple of rare exceptions to that. One that I'm aware of in New England involved a bank and a company called Pat's Construction Company. If you want, I can try and find the site while we're talking and drop it into chat, or not. That's up to you. But the answer basically is no. And I often give a talk about this in which I say that cybersecurity is coming up quickly on its Pinto moment. The Pinto being, the exploding car. For years, car manufacturers were protected from liability, and the rule was caveat emptor. You bought it, you own it, it's your problem. And then the Pinto exploded, and that Ralph Nader's Unsafe at Any Speed created a complete transformation of liability. And now car manufacturers who manufacture bad cars pay money, and that's why we have safer cars. Soon, we're going to have a Ford Pinto moment that will be the end, I think, of shrink wrap click-through immunity from liability of cyber companies, whether they're software or hardware manufacturers. My opinion.
And what will be the, Unsafe at Any Speed had a great effect partly because it had a great title. What is the title of the cybersecurity liability book that will have the Nader-like effect?
Tesla's car killed me.
Mr. Botts, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Paul. It's really great to see and hear you. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the continued use of BGP for router-to-router communications. It just seems simply to be a tool today used by the Chinese to intermittently listen to all communications to and from the Pentagon or other adversaries when convenient.
Well, that's a really wonderful question. BGP, the Border Gateway Protocol, for those who don't know, was designed for ease of use and communication. Rough consensus and running code is how the Internet Engineering Task Force characterizes its objective, which is to say it wasn't built for security. And everybody is well aware of how deeply flawed BGP and many of our other internet protocols are in terms of security. The challenge, and it's a deep one, is to build a new protocol that is retrospectively compatible, that is backward compatible to the existing architecture of the internet. And my understanding, and now you're getting to and slightly beyond the limits of my technical understanding. So if I say this wrong, somebody who knows a little better on board, like Mike Godwin might actually correct me. Is that they're working to try and reconfigure it, rebuild it with greater security protocols involved, but that's proving very difficult. So unless you want to burn the whole thing down and start over again, we're not going to see BGP as a security backbone anytime soon.
I literally taught BGP yesterday. So can I just talk for 60 seconds just to just because it's in my head? I mean, everything that Paul said, of course, is correct. I just add that what BGP is that, so the internet, right, is is a network of networks, right? So your ISP talks to Yale, talks to Intel, talks to General Motors, right? And so the way in which different networks know what IP addresses the other networks are using is through BGP. So BGP allows the broadcast of hey, if you want to send it to this message to these addresses, send it to me, or I know where to get it. And the problem with BGP is that it's really based on trust. Because when BGP started, there weren't that many networks to connect, and everyone kind of knew each other, and it's kind of kludgy. They just wanted to make it work. Now there's close to, at least in terms of they allocated close to 100,000 of these networks called autonomous systems, and the worry, and it's happened before, is that malicious actors will just kind of announce fictitious routes. And it will propagate through the internet because BGP really is based on trust, and packets will go where they're not supposed to go. And this happened in 2011 when all of YouTube went to Pakistan, and what happened with Facebook 2 weeks ago, where because of some unrelated problem, Facebook withdrew its routing announcements to the internet, and BGP took it back, and nobody knew where to find the specific kinds of servers that Facebook uses. So the question is it's such a central thing. How do networks talk to each other in the internet, which is what it is? How you change that seems so both essential and tricky. Talk about, as you were saying, Paul, single point of failure. I mean, this is as bad as it gets.
We are going to leave it there. Paul Rosenzweig, you're a great American, a great Costa Rican, and welcome back to DC. We will be back tomorrow. It'll be cheese night. I think Kate will even be back. There will be cheese. There will be an evening. And all of that will be exactly 23 hours from now. Will Luke be with us, Genevieve?
We'll see. He's kind of a diva.
Hey, Ben?
Yeah?
Hey, Ben? When do you think the Eastman thing will be up on Lawfare? Shall we tease it?
I think it will be up tomorrow, won't it?
Okay. If you're interested in I used to also do law and or I still do, legal ethics and bar discipline. So if you want to read something about how that might work, and John Eastman, take a read tomorrow.
Yeah, Paul has a
or the next day.
analysis of the John Eastman case forthcoming. It is entitled "John Eastman as Monoculture: A Case Study." That last bit being
no, it is not. No.
We will see you tomorrow, and until then, Genevieve,
we don't have fun anymore, but we still have BGP and trust.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Sounds good.
See you tomorrow, people.
Bye.